Welcome to Finding Your Casual Magic. This is the series where we find beauty in the mundane everyday by retraining our brains to notice all the little things every day that are casually magic. Why? We all look forward to the 1% of days in our lives that are extraordinary, like the wedding, the job promotion, the birthday, but 99% of days in our lives are just ordinary. And how sad would it be if we only allowed ourselves to feel joy 1% of the time? Hey there guys, and welcome to Season 2. For the first official guest episode of Season 2, it only feels right to bring on someone who feels like the embodiment of the values of this podcast. And today I am so excited to be introducing one of my best friends here in Brighton, Ben. Ben is actually kind of like a guardian of this land that we're recording this podcast on today. You might notice if you're watching the video that the set looks a little different. We're in sort of this mythical fairy looking land, and I'm in this gorgeous armchair feeling ready to impart my stories and wisdom into the world. That is because we are in this incredible space in the middle of the woods. Ben's going to tell us more about it later. I feel so lucky and honoured to be bringing his voice onto this podcast today, to have our words and kind of amplified by this land and the energy around us. Ben is really passionate about something that he calls a culture of care. How can we connect deeply to ourselves, to others, and to nature, and create this culture where, in caring for all of those things, there's this culture of reciprocity that's created where we give and we receive and it lifts everyone up together. I actually met Ben back in winter of last year. I met him at a time I really needed him. I had just moved to Brighton. I was feeling quite lonely. One of you guys actually suggested that I go to an event at a nature space at the weekend. I remember walking into this event and it feeling like it absolutely transformed my life, because there were humans like Ben who have so much deep care for humanity, for nature. It just felt like this patch of light in kind of the darkness of my life at that time. So yeah, I feel so grateful to have met him, and he constantly teaches me so much, and I know that you guys are going to get so much out of today's episode. Ben has a super interesting story because he actually kind of started out as a climate activist. Through that process of, even being arrested, doing all these actions, he realized that we can't just fight these harmful systems. We also need to reimagine spaces around the values that we want the world to have. How can we create these spaces that are built on radical love? So we're going to dig into that today. We're going to dig into what it means to build this radically loving community. So get ready. I hope you're feeling relaxed wherever you are. Feel free to grab a hot drink. Welcome to the episode, Ben.
Thank you very much. It's an honour to be here. A real honour. Can I just say quickly, seeing as you kind of spent some time kind of picking up my work, I'd also love to do the same for you, to say that it's been such an honour to meet you and to work alongside you and to learn more about your practice and the way in which you contribute to the world and contribute your visions and your passions, which feels so deeply like it's from that same place of being in service to others. I'm just so excited to sharing it with you and for what we're going to bring.
Ben, thank you.
It's
welcome. Almost as though you believe in reciprocity.
It's almost
Thank you. I didn't expect to get the hype. I really appreciate your words. Thank you. I would love if you could tell us more about this space and this land that we're on, if you want to.
Yeah, absolutely, of course. We are in the Future Roots yurt. Future Roots is a project that has been running since 1997. We've got a long history of people gathering on these lands, and this yurt was actually one of the first things constructed here and has just been steeped in so much ritual and ceremony and gathering for decades. It's a real powerful space where you can feel the depth of that history in it. And I think that's really what gives it the magic that it holds, is how many spaces of different kinds it has held. And this is the most recent iteration with a bit more modern technology than it's probably had before, which is so exciting because it's an opportunity for the magic to be broadcast and to be shared. The real vision behind this project is for it to be a community hub, but also to be a temple for nature and to be somewhere where we can really sit in reverence for the natural world, recognize our place within it, recognize how much we receive from it, so that we can then know how much we have to give back.
So we start every episode with 2 little traditions. The first tradition is that I am going to play us a voice note from one of you guys telling us about your casual magic of the week. And I actually haven't heard this in advance, so this is also my first time hearing it.
Hi Jade, my name's Kira and I live in London. My casual magic this week happened while I was cycling to work one day. So I cycle through this quite run down, dingy, soulless feeling town. But in this town there's a civic centre, and on top of that civic centre, a pair of peregrine falcons nest every year. And the council actually live stream it, so we see the eggs being laid, we see them hatching and eventually fledging the nest. Now as I was cycling to work this day, I was thinking to myself that I hadn't actually seen the peregrine falcons flying this year. Normally I see them flying around quite a lot. Anyway, this thought passes me by and a song pops into my head. Now this song I heard for the first time at the Casual Magic Connection event, and the lyrics go, "All I have to do is open my heart wider than ever before." Now, as I'm singing this song to myself in my head, I look up and right above me, I see one of the peregrines just soaring through the sky. And I just felt, this is magic.
Beautiful.
That is gorgeous. Wow. Thank you so much, Kira, for sharing that. That was special. I had no idea that there was going to be this twist of her having come to the event. And so, yeah, we will have both met her because I hosted a wonderful event here at Future Roots with Ben. Thank you so much for sharing that, Kira. And now I would like to invite everyone listening and also you, Ben, to come into a 60-second meditation with me. So I love to take this time to invite you guys to really just become present with where you are right now. So you can come into your breath, come into your body. And if maybe you're on the bus or you're in public or you're cycling, it's okay not to close your eyes. You can also just take a moment to become aware of your surroundings. But if you are able to, I dare you to come into a seat.
So sitting comfortably, just take a big deep breath. Breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth. As you breathe in, a sense of taking in lots of fresh air. As you breathe out, gently closing the eyes and just a sense of letting go of any stress, any tension in either the body or the mind. And as you sit there, allowing thoughts to come and go, just following the breath, in particular the out breath. If you need to put your hand on your stomach, you can. But just following the out breath all the way to the end. Each time, just letting go of any stress, any tension. And then when you're ready, just gently opening the eyes again.
If you guys enjoyed that meditation and you want to meditate more, but maybe you don't know where to begin, I can't recommend enough this amazing app called Headspace. And they're the sponsor of today's episode, which is genuinely just such a dream. I first started meditating with Headspace when I was 16. I was introduced to meditation by my mum, who is a yoga teacher, but I had no idea how to learn the skill of meditation. Headspace has courses on everything from meditation for sleep, meditation for anxiety, meditation for exam stress, which I used a lot during my GCSEs. So if you're looking to learn meditation in a more structured way and you're a beginner, I can't recommend Headspace enough. And they very kindly have given us a code exclusively for the podcast that can get you 60 days completely free, no strings attached. And the code is Casual Magic, all in capital letters. That is CASUALMAGIC. So yeah, I really hope that it helps you if you're looking to meditate more. And let's get into the episode. Ben.
Hi.
Hello. Hi. You are someone who is really passionate about protecting nature and the earth, and you've been so involved in climate activism. I would love to hear more about the journey that got you to that place. Have you always been really passionate about the climate, or when was that turning point for you?
I was lucky enough to grow up in a whole bunch of different places, but the place where the longest was in Southeast Asia, in a place called Brunei Darussalam. which is a tiny little speck of a country, population of about 500,000 people, so smaller than most cities in the UK. And I don't think I definitely at the time didn't recognise the influence that being in that environment was having on me. But I think the presence of such ecological health, you know, when I was at school, every Tuesday I would go running out in the rainforest and seeing pitcher plants and ants the size of your little finger and monitor lizards and snakes and monkeys. The main thing that I remember from that time was the way in which you felt entirely encapsulated by nature. When you're out in there, the sounds, your ears are full of the drum of insects and the hum. And maybe there's some running water, or there's, you know, some distant bird calls. Like we had hornbills, these beautiful birds. I think from growing up in that environment, I really got to understand what ecological health feels like. I think that's both from a conscious perspective, but also from a spiritual one as well. Being in the presence of such ecological health just gave me this appreciation for it. And then coming back to England for university in 2019 was a very interesting process in lots of ways, a big culture shock for sure. But I think also a big thing that I realized was, wow, it's so quiet here. You go out for a walk in the woods and you hear the traffic. Go out for a walk in the woods and obviously there are birds that are calling and singing, but you don't have insects necessarily. You know, like insect populations in this country have declined pretty significantly, you know, since 1970, let alone since the Industrial Revolution. We did have, you know, that kind of health here. But due to urbanization and due to bad stewardship from our leaders, we haven't got the same level of ecological health anymore. I think that really started this journey into realizing, okay, so I felt what health feels like, and now I can feel the absence of that here. Back when I was maybe 19, I went through this deep, deep ecological grief. I remember sitting on my sofa in my living room, literally crying my eyes out, and every time I closed my eyes, I was just seeing forest fires. And I was just seeing like the destruction of the natural world, that I just felt so much pain. The only time that I felt that pain to be subsiding or to be manageable was when I was in action and when I was trying to do something with that. Yeah. I was so empowered by those around me, so empowered by the structures like Extinction Rebellion and Just Stop Oil and other kinds of structures that provided this kind of structure to be able to direct that into it. So I think it was that grief, but I think the reflections I've had on that grief since is that it was from a place of love. And I think I just so deeply loved the natural world and so deeply wanted to have it flourish and have it thrive and be as beautiful and as healthy as I remembered it in Brunei, you know, and to be constantly being given the information and given more and more facts and about the state of the ecological crisis as it is today. I just felt so compelled to be a part of whatever I could do, basically.
I think it's so interesting that you reflected on your grief actually being a form of love, because grief is essentially the loss of something that we love so deeply. And I think grief can often be demonized as an emotion because it feels so heavy, when really it's just one of the most purest manifestations of loving something, right? And wanting it to be whole and pure and existing in its truest form. When thinking about what you were driven to do and sort of getting into, you know, all this campaign work, it reminds me of this idea that hope is an action. And that hope is not something passive that you can just sit there and almost foster optimism out of nowhere that the world's going to get better. And you feel hope when you are somehow trying to create the future you want to see. You've mentioned that in some campaigns you were arrested. And I would love if you could speak to your experience of that and perhaps also help us reframe what it can mean to be arrested, because I think a lot of people listening who maybe aren't as familiar with activism work will associate being arrested with like a crime.
The first thing that I want to start with is a recognition of the position of privilege that I have in the body that I inhabit and how my experience with the criminal justice system, with the police state, with incarceration is so determined by the body that I'm in.
Yeah.
As a straight white man, as someone who presents quite well, someone who presents English, you know, in the way that I sound, all of these things massively inform the experience that I had. I can definitely speak to it, but I think it's important to just basically make that preface.
Yeah.
I have never felt more at peace than I did when I was sitting in the jail cell that I ended up in.
That's a hot take.
Yeah. It was, so I've done 7 actions that have led to arrest. And each time that you are arrested, you spend between 12 and 24 hours in a jail cell, which is essentially like a little box which they put you in with a very simple bed, a little sink. You're given not, you obviously can't have your phone in there with you, you can't have anything. They can give you a book, but predominantly you're just kind of there with yourself. It was always in the wake of taking nonviolent direct action for the climate in different avenues. The feeling of peace that you had in those moments is very interesting, because it is to a degree quite a stressful environment, and it's not designed to be comfortable. But this feeling of like inner satisfaction of like, because you were kind of prepared for arrest when you took the action. When it eventually happened, you're like, okay, I've done it. I've done what I came to do. I've ended up here. That is so powerful, but particularly when it's in the lens of the action that you've taken is fundamentally in service. That was really the place that I felt like it was coming from. When you put yourself in that position, you tend to realize quite a lot about the structures of oppression and the structures of repression that exist and are continuing to be expanded upon. Like literally just yesterday, the MPs passed a bill that prescribes Palestine action. It isn't law yet because it still needs to go through the House of Lords and then through there potentially could be a high court ban. But it was passed 350 something to 26. So the vast majority of our lawmakers believe that Palestine Action, who's never harmed a single person, has only taken action to dismantle the war machine. The vast majority of lawmakers believe them to be a terrorist organization. And this was the same language that was being used for us in the climate space when we were doing the actions that we were taking. The term eco-terrorist was thrown around by so much of the media, so much of lawmakers at the time. I have so many friends who have got years in prison for literally essentially nothing, if you look at the grand scheme of things, significantly less than even violent criminals. This is at a time when our police, our judicial system, our court system, our prison system is at breaking point, as so many of the rest of our kind of state systems are. And yet they're still choosing to prioritize putting non-violent climate protesters in prison. And if we look throughout history, we can see that the label terrorist or the label of criminal or the label of whatever it might be has been used every single time there has been a popular movement for justice. You look at Nelson Mandela, he was a terrorist, in quotation marks. You look at the Black Panther movement in America, or Martin Luther King, or Malcolm X. Again, the word terrorist was used for those people time and time again. But now, what is it, if it's the 80, 90 years into the future,
we have statues of Nelson Mandela.
Exactly.
We're celebrating him.
Yeah. And Gandhi as well.
Sure.
Like the establishment has its status quo that it's trying to maintain, and that is essentially for the benefit of the ones who line the pockets of those maintaining the status quo, the people who are the ruling class.
So how did your work go from fighting against these systems to realizing that maybe your work could be done at a more local level as well, and also about reimagining these community spaces as opposed to just, kind of like doing these direct actions against the players at the top?
I think there was a fundamental shift in, I guess, my hope, actually, in a way. I think when I first began, there was this hope of saving the world, right?
Yeah.
And like this hope of, I am going to be a part of saving the world. And when you've got such a lofty hope, such a lofty ambition, the scale of action required, the scale of action, of input required.
Even the lack of specificity, right? Like,
exactly.
What does it mean to save the world?
Yeah, exactly. It feels so massive.
Yeah.
And so as a result, you end up in the situation where like, okay, if my aim is so large, I've got to do something as big as, throw myself into the gears of the machine, but I've got to, do that scale. After doing that for a couple of years and really giving everything that I possibly could, every fibre of my being, every ounce of energy that I could to that, I think I came away feeling like, wow, these structures are massive. And the only way that we are going to successfully challenge them is if we have, as I was saying, this community structure, this culture of care in the wings, which is supporting and is able to nourish and resource people to be able to do that work. It's very easy for protest movements to become very focused on the material significance of what they're doing. But also we need to be changing the cultures that we have.
Yeah.
And particularly in the West, particularly in England, that we have a lot of individualized, competitive, consumerist cultures, which are very contradictory to the kind of society we're going to need to both address the challenges that we face, but also to face them and to be resilient in the face of a less food secure world, a less water secure world. Time and time again, we see human civilizations facing systemic crises. You know, we can see that literally throughout human history, whether that's maybe it was like a particularly cold winter, which meant that no food could grow, or maybe it was a volcano that erupted, or maybe, you know, whatever it might be. And the modern version of that is the climate crisis, amongst other things, but the climate crisis is a big one. There's so much work that needs to be done materially to address that, but we also need to be having some serious conversations about what kind of society do we want to face those crises. Because if we have an individualized, competitive consumer society trying to deal with a shortfall of 57 million litres of water a day,
we're not going to last long.
And we're going to deal with it through the lens of, this is mine. I'm going to get my weapon. I'm going to get my wall. I'm going to get my barrier. And I'm going to fence off and be like, this water is mine, not yours. When I was really making these realizations and I was thinking about what my role moving forwards wanted to be, because I was starting to feel disenfranchised from the theories of change around the direct action that was happening, it felt too sacrificial. It felt too much like throw these vulnerable people at the problem, get them all in prison, and essentially hope for the best, which I realized was not sustainable and was not actually going to lead to the kind of change that we needed. So it was essentially the realization of that, coupled with the realization of this absolute necessity for cultural change, that led me to start thinking, okay, and what are the vehicles of culture? What are the things which really create culture, drive culture, make it how it is? And there's many answers to that question, but the niche that I landed on in terms of my most direct input was with events, right? Like we have...
You are the event extraordinaire. Literally, Ben will walk through Brighton and everyone will be like, oh my God, Ben. Oh my God, Ben. Like everyone in Brighton knows Ben because you've run an event like for everyone in Brighton at some point. Like between, what was it? You worked for the student union.
Yeah.
Sussex University. Yeah. Always doing events. Tell me about events.
So events. So yeah, so this is essentially the theory of change behind culture of care. And this is, I spent like the best part of a year like researching it for my dissertation, and then wanted to really put it into action.
Could you define culture of care for us?
Yeah, of course. So culture of care is essentially the alternative culture that I believe we need to create. So instead of individualized, we have togetherness. We have community cultures. Instead of a consumerist one, we have a resilient one. Instead of a competitive one, we have an empowered one. And CARE is an acronym, which is community, action, resilience, and empowerment, which I kind of devised as being the four kind of key pillars that create this wider culture of care. So I think the word care is on community and other kind of things are thrown around quite a lot, and they can become very much like buzzwords. And so I really wanted to like drill into like, what does it mean to care for someone? What does it mean to care for yourself? What does it mean to care for nature? Because we can say, oh, just, you know, go and connect with nature, go and hug a tree.
Just go have a bath with a nice little bath bomb and a candle.
Exactly.
Self-care.
Exactly. But what does that actually mean? I definitely haven't landed on the definitive answer for that question. It's still like an ongoing process. But I found that this idea of deep intention in every space that was created, every event that was held, every action that was taken, if I can be thinking through the lens of, is this fostering community? Is this fostering action? Is this fostering a sense of resilience? And is this fostering empowerment? And I thought if I can be doing that, and if I can look around a space and be like, I can see how this is fostering those four things, then I can believe that it is fostering a culture of care in the people who are there, in the wider space. If those people can then move forward as agents of that care, and with the tools required, with the nourishment and the resources required, they can then go and affect it in their lives, and it can be this ripple effect. That is the vision of culture of care, is that we can create this widespread network of empowered individuals who recognize the fundamental shortfalls and the lack of that's in current cultures, and then has a blueprint for building alternative cultures in their place, so that when we are facing, you know, less food security or a shortage of water or whatever it may be, there is a network, a nexus of people ready. and ready to respond with love and ready to respond with compassion and with justice, because there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be responding with hatred and with violence. And so we're going to need a lot of people.
A lot of people with love.
With love.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much for delineating that. And I think it's so important to have this wider context, because now as we dig down into what culture of care means and how we connect to ourselves, how we connect to others, how we connect to nature, we can see it not as something fluffy, right? Not something that is merely like, oh, I'm feeling a bit sad today, how can I care for myself to make myself happy? But we see it in this wider context of how that act of caring for ourselves has a massive ripple effect in our entire perception of how we then care for everyone around us, and how important that is going to be as we continue to face the inevitable climate destruction that is coming our way. So thank you so much for really helping us hone those links. I think we're ready to dive into culture of care.
Yeah. Just quickly before that, something which I think is really important to bring up is a lot of these ideas and stuff that I'm delivering and talking about here, like, are from my own reflections, but they're really informed by Indigenous knowledge systems from around the world. And particularly from peoples who are already facing devastation, from a Western perspective, from in English, we're sitting in a beautiful yurt in lovely Brighton. We are thinking in terms of, okay, we recognize the culture that currently exists, we recognize the culture that we need for what's coming, right? But it hasn't quite, obviously it hasn't
come fully to us yet.
Exactly. Yeah. What I've really learned from work that I've done with Indigenous solidarity campaigns, particularly Resist Glencore, and working with the Yucba people of Northeast Colombia, is there's so much wisdom and there's so much resilience and empowerment and resistance and just beauty that can be learnt from peoples who have been doing this work for hundreds of years and continue to do so today against just the most horrendous forces and climate devastation and ecological deterioration on their Indigenous lands. I think so much of the strength and the learning that we have to do is going to come from looking at Indigenous knowledge systems from around the world, and also from these lands, which we can get into for sure, the potential they have to offer us with answers, ways of being, ways of acting, which are so grounded and important in these times.
Ben, I'm not going to lie, it's a bit overwhelming, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, you are saying so many things that I am certain people listening will deeply resonate with. We all feel this overwhelm, right, about this poly crisis we're facing, of people in power doing things that are just putting us into an awful position, and we want to resist, but also we have lives to live, and so much in our brains, so much going on in our heads, and it's like it can feel like a lot. And I think a lot of my listeners often will send me messages like, Jade, I just feel so lost in how I can make an impact, how I can be part of doing something. I know I care about the nature. I know that I want to be part of a positive change, but when it feels like such a massive feat to save the world, as you've mentioned, I myself don't know how to contribute. I don't know how to get involved, and maybe even some people listening to this will hear you speak and perhaps feel guilty that they know they were not part of these resistance movements in the past. They were not part of working with Indigenous groups to help them in their resistance. Like, what would you say to someone listening who knows that they care but feels really overwhelmed in the face of everything going on? And maybe you could just offer some words of hope and courage.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so important to come back to that, and it's so important to remember why we are here. That can get very meta, and it can get very kind of like, it's a very big question, right? And I think it sits a lot at the heart of it. And as we feel the structures around us beginning to crumble and beginning to have their cracks and their weaknesses show.
What does that look like?
It's very much like everything that we've been taught at school, right? Everything that we've been taught of like, you're going to get a job. It's going to be great. You're going to work hard. You're then going to get a pension. Yeah. You're going to be able to chill. Yeah. You're going to be able to, all of these things for young people with the economic situation that we're facing, with the political situation that we're facing, all of these things, the news seems to be telling us something completely different to what we have been told for a lot of the upbringing that we had about the future that we should expect for ourselves, right? And the loss of the security in that
Yes.
is scary. It's terrifying, and that makes complete sense. The first thing is radical compassion for where you're at and with how you're feeling. Emotions are a compass in a way. They are the thing which guides us. They're almost like the universe speaking to us in a way of like, okay, I'm feeling this way about something, and it's demonstrative that there is something deeper there which needs to be looked at and space needs to be held for. And that's an uncomfortable process, right? Like meditation, when we sit in that space with ourselves, it's pretty uncomfortable, particularly to start with.
Like you think you're going to be really zen.
Yeah.
And then you close your eyes and you're like, whoa.
All these things.
There's a lot of anxious thoughts in my brain right now.
Yeah. And particularly if you've, what a lot of people do is they kind of carve out a time of meditation, like 10 minutes, but the half an hour before and the hour after, you're on Instagram scrolling, seeing pictures of Gaza, or seeing the climate crisis, or seeing whatever it may be. And so you're bringing into that space and the reality of what the world is facing. I think it's really important to stay grounded in the fact that the human experience is one of suffering, first and foremost. Like there is that is a quintessential fact of life. Like people will suffer.
It is true, but depressing.
Yeah. People have been suffering for millennia, and we can see it so viscerally and so visibly now on our phones and in our newsfeed and whatever. But that doesn't mean that it wasn't happening before. It's not like before the atrocities happening in Gaza was happening, people weren't suffering, because there's people in Sudan, there's people in the Congo, there's people in Colombia, there's people in Yemen, there's people in the UK, who are facing challenges and real difficulties.
There's your next door neighbour, potentially.
There's your next door neighbour, exactly. There's yourself, right? There's yourself, which is suffering, and it obviously may not be to the same scale, but it's still suffering. And I think that's where the compassion comes in, right? It's when you realise the universality of suffering, and you realise, okay, like this is a universal experience that all humans go through to different degrees, but all go through. That's heavy, and that can lead to one of two things, and oftentimes does. It can lead to like wanting to kind of hide away from it, wanting to shy away from that feeling, which makes complete sense, or it can lead to acceptance. And it can lead to the fact that, again, when I was talking about my ecological grief before, and how actually I realised that was just from a place of love, we can realise the same thing, which is that the pain that we are so deeply feeling, the anxiety that we're feeling, the fear, the whatever it may be, at the heart of that is love. Deep down, like it's because we love our friends, we love the world, we love ourselves, we love each other. Because we love those things, we don't want them to suffer. Of course we don't. If we did, that would be maniacal, which feels so counterintuitive, because oftentimes people relate love with this feeling of like elation and joy and like, oh, I am in love with this person or in love with this song, and it makes me feel so good. And suffering feels like the complete flip of that. Like when I'm suffering, I'm feeling so heavy and I'm feeling so scared and I'm feeling so sad. But it's when you come into this realization of the central oneness of those things that you realize, oh, actually, when I'm feeling sad, that's so beautiful.
Ben, I love your idea of culture of care, and I would love to dig more into these pillars that you've talked about. I would love if we could dig into your journey to gaining that level of care for yourself. Perhaps you could begin by describing your journey to self-knowledge in one word.
I think it would need to be forgiveness. A lot of my reflections on caring for myself have really come from a loosening of what I have been taught throughout my entire upbringing and throughout the social condition that I've received as to what the definition of being a good person is, or being and particularly a good man, and particularly around like the masculinity. Because I think that for a long time, like throughout a lot of my childhood, a lot of my teenage years, even into like kind of my early 20s as well, I was so hard on myself. All the time. I remember like being a child, getting something quite small wrong, and literally like hitting my head against a wall because I was being so...
Baby Ben!
Baby Ben, I know, little baby Ben, because I was just so self-critical. And everything that I did. And I think what that stemmed from was a fear of abandonment. I think that's a root fear of mine, is that I will be abandoned, basically. And I think so many people have that same thing. So I think I was so self-critical with myself because I was trying to produce a situation in which there was no reason why someone would abandon me. And in every single moment, I was like, I have to succeed at this. I have to win this race. I have to get this job. I have to get these good grades.
Yeah. And you feel in control of your sources of love.
Yes, exactly. And so it was very much through this lens of like accomplishment. I have to achieve so much in order for me to be like worthy of love, and in order for because I think there's the fundamental belief that love is conditional.
Yes.
You know, and they have to produce the conditions to be loved. I think this process of coming into care for the self, and it's obviously still an ongoing process, and I'm still very much on this journey, but it's the process of loosening the grip on that, loosening the grip on this sense of I have to produce conditions to be loved, and realize that actually love is a never-ending force.
What would you say to someone who, when they close their eyes and they say to themselves, I am loved, that doesn't feel true because they feel that they have no evidence of that love?
Firstly, know that that is so understandable and that is so human to feel that way. I want to send you the deepest compassion I can possibly muster, because I existed for such a long time in that same state and still do, even though I'm, you know, saying all of these words and seem like I've got things kind of worked out. Like
we love a self-actualized guy on a podcast.
Long hair. It's so important to recognize that every human experiences that, and every human has those moments where they close their eyes and they go, wow, I'm alone. That's the first step, is a recognition that what you're feeling makes so much sense. And also that feeling has been constructed, right? It's been produced by the structures that are around us, by the, you know, increasing isolation of the society. Because if you've got a closed heart and you believe that nothing loves you, then you're so much less able to change things, so much less able to be an agent of positive change, because you don't feel the nourishment that you need to do that work. And that comes back to what we were talking about earlier with the activism and stuff. Like, to do any kind of work on yourself, for others, for the world, for nature, requires you to be nourished.
Yeah.
And so many people are so deeply unnourished at the moment. When you come home to nature, when you come to a river, you come to a tree, you see a bird, you can fall into the fact that even though you may not feel yourself that you are loved, you can trust infinitely and so deeply that that tree loves you so much, like more than you can even possibly imagine. Initially, it might feel weird to do that, and it might feel like, oh, this. How can I know that? How can I trust that? It's so difficult to put into words why or how you can, but you just can. Like
Hippies be like.
Yeah, literally. But I think if I'm to try it, it's something to do with the inherent oneness. And that's also how we can know that we can love every human, and every human loves us, is because we are all one being, that the earth is a closed system. The only input that we have is sunlight. And so everything on this planet is inherently connected. We can't necessarily see that because our perceptions and our senses are limited. But in the same way that an ant may be on your finger and not be able to know that what it's on is connected to this much, much larger whole, because the ant only has the senses to be able to see its immediate surroundings on the finger. But from our perspective, as the being which has got more perspective, we can see that what the ant is on has got this entire body that it's connected to. And I think that we have the same relationship with the natural world. It's from our perspective, the tree, the bird, the fox, the stoat, the whale, the bluebell, they all seem separate. But if you take a higher perspective, you can see that it's all one being.
Something I like to think of too is we all come into this world so deeply loving and trusting of everything, right? Little kids, they look up at the sky in awe. They look at trees and they're imagining like little forest fairies and in the leaves, and they have imaginary friends, and they look at adults and have so much love and trust for adults. And we all come into the world with an open heart, and we are taught to close it, and we are taught hatred, we are taught bias, we are taught discrimination. And I think knowing that each of us has this innate loving state gives me hope that even in adulthood, there still is this innate part of us that is loving and does have the capacity to be open, because we once were. And I think even if there are people in my life who I question based on their actions if they love me, I like to believe and trust that there is a part of them that loves me, because I know that they're capable of love, because all humans are capable of it and have been capable of it in their past. So that gives me so much trust. As we look into the next tenet of the culture of care, so fostering that caring relationship for others in our lives, I think it's such a nice question to ask. What is the difference between attachment and connection?
So I think connection is really the inherent force that exists in everything, right? Like we can feel it, right? When you're in a room with someone that you're close to, you can feel that connection that's there. And there's a purity to that feeling. It's like a pull. It's like a magnetism, right? It's like you can be in a room and you can feel that there is a person there who you trust. I think that's really what it comes down to. It's someone that you can feel safe in the presence of. And it's all about nervous system, right? Like our nervous system wants to be relaxed. And particularly in the society that we live in, our nervous system spends so much of its time being on edge, right?
Yeah.
And probably people listening now, like, notice your shoulders. Are they slightly up or are they down? You know, is your chin like, is that down? Is that and all these things are subtle indications that our nervous system is on edge. And I think that connection, the real beauty of connection, is when you find something or someone where your nervous system just relaxes, you know? And I think in order for that to happen, you need to feel trust, you need to feel safe, you need to feel held. That is the beauty of connection. And I feel that with you, which is so fun.
With you too,
which is so
man.
fun. And it's like you when you find people in your life who you can feel that with.
Guys, I just have to quickly say something. Ben is the best hugger that you will ever meet on this planet. Like, I actually feel so sorry for all of you listening because you don't get to experience a hug with Ben. Wait, what was this thing? Didn't like your hero tell you you're a good hugger?
Oh my god, yeah. So there's a band, Oh Wonder.
I love Oh Wonder. I
yeah.
think it was on Oh Wonder. Okay.
Yeah. Josephine and Anthony, absolute babes. And I went to a super intimate gig with Josephine and Anthony. But he was there as well. and with Oh Wonder, and they were playing. And afterwards, I kind of finished the show and walked out, and I saw them, and I went over and said hello, and I gave Josephine a big hug because she's like, their music has just been such a important part of my life. And like as a child, like again, that's where I found connection, right? Is because in their music I felt safe, I felt held in their music. And in those moments where we're like kind of feeling this sense of not being held, we feel like scared, we feel isolated, and we find a person or a song or a pet or whatever it might be, which we feel that connection with, that real rich connection. And we can just sink into that and like feel that warm embrace come over us. And I don't know, I feel like I just channeled that into that hug. She was like, wow, you're an amazing hugger, and then came back and gave me a second hug. And I was literally like, that was it, my life peaked at that moment. Everything else after that, no matter what it is, like
top of the LinkedIn or the Hinge, just like excellent hugger. Excellent
hugger, yeah, as accredited by Josephine from Wonder. Yeah. And so link it all back together. I think for me, connection is that, whereas attachment is the illusion of that.
Ooh.
Yeah. And so it's like we can think that this thing is giving us that nourishment, but actually it's more of a meeting of the needs in the short term rather than a kind of more holistic, genuine trust and safety. And I think a lot of people struggle to tell the difference, right? Because, and particularly when we haven't received much in the way of like structured emotional education from schools or from parents or from friends or from society in general. It's very difficult to know these things, and oftentimes we have to feel them, or we have to find people or kind of situations or environments which can help to teach us it. But I think for me, at least, that is the kind of fundamental difference, is connection is a real, genuine place of love where our nervous system can relax into it. Whereas attachment is more of it's tight, it's gripping on, and sometimes we can think that by gripping really tightly, we're going to be able to hold on to our needs being met, hold on to that feeling of safety or whatever. But actually, by gripping so hard, we're hurting ourselves. You know, I mean, and you can literally, that's why the idea of letting go is such a quintessential and perfect metaphor for it. It's because you can literally picture yourself gripping really tightly onto something, and the amount of tension that you feel and the pain of like in your fingers of when you hold something really hard. But when you let go and you're still holding it, but you're no longer got that really tense grip, the suffering I think comes when you're gripping really tightly to what was. You know, it's like you think back to the memories that you shared together, or the times that you had together, and it's like, oh, that was so beautiful. And you can feel like you're gripping, right? You're like, oh,
I want that again.
I just want that again. Exactly. I want that again. And that, for me, that's attachment, right? Because it's what was. Because the past, obviously, it did happen. It was real. And you don't want to discredit that. But it's no longer happening. And actually, the more that you stay living in that world, the more that you stay in that gripping tightly, you're just causing kind of continued pain for yourself. And again, so much easier said than done to actually move on from that. But I think connection is what allows you to do that. Is because you can realize, all of the beauty that was in that moment, that still exists now in this moment in a different way, with different people, maybe not even with people at all, maybe with something else, but it still exists here and now, because the force of beauty and love is eternal. It's ever present. Attachment is what we have kind of to the past and to things which did happen. And I think if we continue to live in that, then we're just continuing to cause ourselves pain. The beauty of connection is it's in the here and now. We can feel the connection in this moment with another being, or with a pet, or with a song. It holds us and it nourishes us, and it allows our nervous system to relax in a way which attachment to things that used to give us that and used to be a source of connection, they're just going to give us more pain now at this point.
I would love us to speak more to community. And I think this is something that young people in particular are craving. We see it from social media, you know, people having this desire to build in-person connections. There's this concept of a third place, which is, you know, an idea of a place where you don't live there, you don't work there, but is a third place where you could go and just hang out with people that you've met. You can go and hang out with friends. You don't have to pay money to be there. And I think due to a loss of these third places in society, young people are struggling more than ever to find spaces where they can make friends, hang out with friends, foster existing friendships. I would love if you could speak more to this desire to create community, to perhaps define what community is. Help us out. How do we create community in our lives? You're someone who I think is so embedded in local communities.
When we come back to like the reason why I wanted to try and be as embedded as possible, it comes back to the resilience. It's like when we are together, we are so much more powerful than when we're apart, and we are so much more able to meet our needs, basically. And that's really what was provided by community structures in the past, whether that be, you know, the church, for instance, was such a integral part of so many communities on these lands for such a long time. It isn't really anymore. And social media and the digital age has brought this sense of community. It's brought this like digital space where lots of people can gather, and that is very powerful, and people definitely do find real strong community in online, but it's missing the tangibleness of
embodiment.
Exactly. It's missing that being in person, and means also that you're communicating to a screen. It's like you are communicating with another person on the other end of it, but really what you're communicating with is the screen, right? And there's a difference.
Your primitive brain is just seeing a screen.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas now, in this instance, you know, we're here, we're talking, we can touch each other in a way which you can't do when you're online. The importance of community in these times cannot be overstated. It is what is going to get us through. It's what is going to give us the strength and the tools and the resilience that we're going to need to face what we need to face, and also to do what we need to do. You know, this is a time of a lot of change, of a lot of uncertainty, and it's when we come together that we can realize what we can do next.
But Ben, I don't want to save the world. I just want to be happy and frolic with people. How can I build a community that's not grounded on just like being resilient to saving the world?
That's a very good point. That's a very good point. And I definitely don't mean to make it seem like, you know, you need to have community in order to, or you need to only be meeting community in order to do this work. That's what I'd recommend, is like find something which you really feel passionate about, that you really enjoy, that really makes your heart sing, and then find other people in your area who are doing the same thing. And if that doesn't exist, then I'd really encourage you to be brave enough to try and start it yourself. And what you'll realize is the things that you love, a lot of other people out there will also love. And also the amount of gratitude that people will feel if that doesn't exist in an area and you create that space. So I think climbing is a fantastic example, because that's just been like such a beautiful interest of mine that's like I've done so much with. And
You'll always find Ben in the trees.
you'll always find me in the trees. Yeah.
like quite literally. Like you'll look up and you'll be like, oh,
There he is.
Ben.
It's in those spaces that we find inherent humanness, which I think can so easily be lost and can so easily be obfuscated by what we've been told being a human is, which is very productive.
Yeah,
You know,
for sure.
we've been told that like to be a human, you need to be working hard, achieving things. But actually, it's when we're in community doing things that we love, whether that be sewing or climbing or whatever it might be, you can realize that, oh, this is actually what it's all about. Is
and
sitting,
your personality being here is like enough.
Yeah. And your full self, right?
Yeah.
Because when you're doing these activities, when you find the thing which kind of unites a group of people, a shared interest, a shared passion, it's so beautiful.
I would love if you could talk me through. So in my imagination, I'm in the climbing gym. I'm Ben. I'm seeing this bouldering wall. I'm about to go climb. I see all these other random people on their own climbing. No one's really talking. I'm here because I love climbing, and I'm here because I'd love to meet people who also love climbing. But this atmosphere is not giving community. How do I go from I'm in a space with people who have a similar interest to it feeling like a community? I think this is a struggle that a lot of young people have. They know that they can go to places with their interests, but I think converting that into community is very hard.
For sure. No, completely. And I think a lot of people are facing that. The way that a space is constructed will be a huge decider in how much that happens. And that's why with Culture of Care, with all the events that we do, our first and foremost priority is exactly that question, is how can we make this the most connecting space possible? How can we make this have as many opportunities as possible for genuine connection to be made? Because it's from genuine connection that community is fostered. If you go into a space which hasn't had that same intentionality and hasn't had that same like thought put into it, which most spaces haven't, remembering the playfulness of human interaction, the nerves that you're feeling make complete sense, but 9 times out of 10 are going to be in your head. And when you take that first step of just saying hello with an open heart, and with a sense of curiosity and a sense of playfulness and a sense of not going into it with the expectation of, oh, I'm going to approach this person and we're going to become friends, or we're going to have some kind of like really great connection. Just coming in.
You build yourself up like with a fear of rejection as well.
Exactly. Yeah, because again, the more expectation that you have, the more chance there is of it not going that way and then feeling deflated. So just approach that environment with a sense of curiosity. What could I learn from this person? What could I talk to this person about? And particularly asking questions. I think that's a really, really great, very simple, very easy thing to start with.
So you know, you've just come off, you just bouldered, you're standing there, there's someone next to you. What are you going to say to them?
You could say, have you tried this climb?
Have you tried this climb?
Yeah, because it can then take the focus of the conversation off of a stranger talking with another stranger, and it can put it onto the subject which is shared, right? And that person will either go, oh yeah, I just climbed it earlier, and then at that point you can say, oh, what did you think about that little section there? Or if, you know, take it out of climbing and put it into something else like sewing. Like if you're sewing in a room full of people who are also sewing, maybe you could ask someone like, oh, like what inspired you to want to sew that? Or, oh, what do you think about this knot? Like, have I done this correct? You know? And if you allow people to help you and allow people to feel like they're helping you, that really can immediately accelerate the process of connection. Because suddenly there's a trust being made, right? Is I am putting myself in a position to trust your input on something. that I've been doing or that
Love
is happening
that.
in front of us. People want to
And
be
the
helpful.
humility, right? Of like,
Yeah.
I'm here climbing, but I also don't know everything. Right? Imagine you've just done a perfect climb. It looked like you did that route amazingly. Someone's looking at you being like, oh, Ben must have been coming here for years. Like this random guy, I can't talk to him. He's too good at it. But imagine, this amazing climber comes down and goes, have you got any advice for that next climb? Right? Like, as you say, opening that space for advice creates that trust and that welcome humility from both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then if you're wanting to kind of like continue it forwards, then you can then start to invite them to share things about themselves, and again, people really love to feel heard. I think that is the fundamental thing when it comes to connection, is if you can make someone feel heard and feel seen, even a small way, they're going to really, really appreciate that so deeply, because so much of conversations that happen, so much of interactions that happen is turn taking. It's like I'm waiting for my turn to speak and that person's waiting for their turn to speak, and we're not really speaking about anything in particular. But if you can instead turn and be like, oh, I'm actually going to consciously hold space for this person to just talk about what's happening in their life, or even if it's not as deep as that, what's happening in front of us at this time, and actually like genuinely listen, they're going to really appreciate that. And they're then going to be much more inclined to hold that space for you. And it's when that space is being held for both that the connection happens.
I love that. How do we go from connection with this one person to a feeling of community in a wider group? Because something that I've experienced is, I think I'm very good at making one-on-one connections. I'm quite good at one-on-one friendships, but I think it's much more difficult to create community, which in my definition of community is often a lot of people of varying personalities and interests and different backgrounds and experiences. Like communities is so much broader than maybe like two people who are extremely like-minded in many ways. How do you connect larger groups of people? And how can people feel a sense of belonging to large groups of people?
Fostering a larger sense of belonging and a larger sense of community, that I think really comes from a sense of shared values and visions. I think when you have a group of people who are very different, if you can find the thing that brings them all together, that is where the larger, broader connection happens. And I think particularly in spaces where that larger value or that larger vision is beyond just the self, so beyond just self-improvement or beyond just self-satisfaction or self-experience, but is larger in terms of we are all here to play music together. We are all here to serve food to this group of people. Like if you're working in like a soup kitchen or whatever, we are all here to plant trees. When there is an act of service that sits at the core of the shared values and the shared vision, everyone is then coming together around that act and around that value. When we have those kinds of spaces, like what we try and foster at Future Roots, that the ability to drop into that larger sense of community and belonging is really present.
That's so interesting, because I think I've never made that connection between community and service. Like, obviously I can see that being a link, but I haven't seen that as a precursor to, large groups of people feeling the sense of belonging. Like for me, I think the biggest sense of belonging to a community I've ever felt was during university. I went to university where there was 160 of us from all around the world, very different life experiences. Like I was the only one from the UK, and we moved to 6 different countries with this group of 160 people. We were just radically different. But there was this sort of sense of open-mindedness, desire to learn from each other, desire to learn from the world, that I think was that shared value system that you were speaking to. But I think in the adult world, it's much harder to find these constructed environments of communities. So I love how actionable that feels, that in you aiming to make service in some way, you will find other people who are also connected to that mission of service. And it's just like a win-win for everyone, right? So win for you because you're acting in service, which makes you feel good already, and you're interested in this service area. Then you're also tangibly creating impact through the service that you're doing, but it's a way to then meet community. I think that's beautiful.
From my experience, at least, it's where the most genuine and real community is found, because the word community is thrown around so much.
100%.
Like every brand has a community, and every corporation is like, we just love our community so much. But again, it's because what the company is trying to do with that is because they recognize the absolute power of community
Yes.
and how powerful it is, but they're trying to create themselves as the center, the focus point around which it all gravitates.
Yes, true.
Because if they know if they can do that, they're going to sell way more.
Yeah.
They're going to, foster much more brand awareness, etc., etc. But that isn't genuine, because what it's around, what is based, the focus point is inherently to be making money, or it's inherently to be.
But I'm actually interested to challenge you on this.
Mm.
Do you think that isn't genuine community? So let's say Soul Cycle. Let's pick something. Soul Cycle, I think everyone knows that they are famous for their community. It's a spinning class that you go to, but you're a soul cycler. If you do Soul Cycle, it is a part of your identity. And I know that when soul cyclers meet fellow soul cyclers, there is this instant bond and connection that happens there, where they feel a sense of belonging to something larger than themselves. And I would argue that is genuine, even though maybe the purpose of those connections was made by the company to continue selling a service.
Yeah, I can definitely see where you're coming from, and I would never knock something which brings people together.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, because that's the human experience. That's what we're all searching for. I just think we have to be careful what the intentions behind a gathering of people are. We can see throughout history examples of bad actors utilizing the power of community, the power of gathering people to enact not so great measures, right? Not so great acts. I'm not saying it for a second that Soul Cycle is doing that at all. We need to be aware of the root intentions behind the gathering of people are, so that we can be best informed about what the potential outcomes of that gathering may be.
Interesting. So for listeners who are seeking community, do you think that a step one is not just identifying a space where that community could be found, but also questioning the intentions of that space to ensure that they're aligning themselves with the community they actually want to be part of?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that this shouldn't make people get too overcritical, because the last thing that I want would be someone to hear that and be like, oh, well, this intention may not be fully aligned, and therefore I'm going to stay by myself instead of going. Because actually it's when you step out into that thing, it's when you go into these kinds of spaces that the first step happens. You meet the person who's going to take you to the next thing, or whatever it might be. And also to recognize it as a continual act of learning and growing. I definitely wouldn't want people to be over critical of things, for sure. I just think it's important that the community that we find is one that will genuinely nourish us and will generally be there for us, even if we can no longer afford the £25 it costs to come to a soul cycle class, or whatever it is. That's
a good way of putting it.
Right? That's the point.
The
That's really
resilience
important.
piece of
Exactly.
the community too.
Yeah, exactly.
Even if I couldn't afford to do a soul cycle class, would this community still love me?
Yes. Yeah, and be there for me, right?
And be there for me.
Yeah, and I think that's where community is based around service, or is based around that kind of intention. That's where it can be so powerful and so fulfilling, is because you can know that because we're all acting in service, everyone who's there has come there to do that. Yeah. And they can then also give to you in the same way they're giving to the community that you're collectively serving.
I love that. I actually think my favourite thing about community is I love having so many different depths of connection. And I think as someone who has a lot of one-on-one friendships, people don't need to know everything about me. I don't need to know everything about them in order to feel such a genuine desire for them to live a good life. And I just love them, and I feel this sense of belonging with them, and I want to share space with them. I don't need to have crazy depth, it's in a community, I feel like you have these nodes where you are really close friends with them, but you also have people that you hardly know anything about. Maybe you hardly even know their name, but you share space with them often. You are aware of their activities in the community that you're part of, and so you feel this love, this sense of belonging, but maybe you don't even have a lot of semantic knowledge about this person's life. And I think that's so unique and beautiful about the nature of community, that you can feel actually connected to someone that you don't even know that much about.
Yeah, for sure. Through the shared thing. Through
the shared infrastructure of the community, the invisible infrastructure. What's your favourite thing about community?
My favourite thing about community? There's so many. It feels like it's actually quite echoing what you were saying, but around collective nourishment. I love when I'm in a space, a community space, and I can see a whole bunch of people collectively having their needs met. You know, collectively being nourished, and
wow.
the power that you can feel from that, you know, particularly in these times when such spaces are getting rarer and harder to access, like a room full of people who are all being fed, and that could be fed by food, that could be fed by music, or that could be fed by singing, you know, like whatever it might be. But it's like, and you can feel in the air that people are having their needs being met in that moment. And that's so beautiful and so powerful. And honestly, that feeling is what drives me in the work that I do. Like, that's why I continue to want to host all these different events and continue to want to like do all this work to make all these different spaces and things happen, is for that moment where I can look around and be like, oh, here are 150 people who are all having their needs met in this moment. That's just so beautiful and inspiring.
I think it's interesting that a conversation like this, or even someone with interests like yours, could be thought of as quite hippie. It's almost been strategically marketed, like hippieism, as something that is reserved for a certain type of person, generally white, like often privileged, and that hippieism is unrelatable and something undesirable or uncool, when in reality the tenets of it are so simple, right? It's kind of centered on love, but in particular connection to nature. And I think connection to nature is one of the most down-to-earth things, simple things that all people could do, and is the opposite of the narrative that hippieism gets, which is that it's something airy-fairy. So with this like groundedness of connection to nature, I would love if you could just give us the simple, what does it mean to feel connected to nature? Do I need to be spiritual? Do I need to learn about all these ancestral practices? If I go to a forest, is that not enough? You know, what does it mean to be connected to nature, in your opinion?
Alongside reverence, and kind of really what the reverence is deeply rooted in, is gratitude. And for me, that is the central pillar of connection with nature. Coming and sitting in the deepest possible gratitude that you can muster for the natural world, and for everything that it gives us and everything that we receive from it. And that is, the list of what that is indescribable, because it is everything. It is everything that we eat, everything that we drink, everything that we breathe, everything that we see. When we sit in that gratitude and we sit in the stillness and we listen, that's where the wisdom of nature is imparted. And I think that in these times, with everything we're facing and everything people are going through, it's within the wisdom of nature that we find the real answers.
Something that makes me feel really connected to nature is I have a favourite tree in my hometown. There's a nature reserve quite near it. And I discovered this tree when I was 13. It was like the first time I'd ever gone on a walk alone without my parents. And I remember just sitting by this tree and looking up at all the beautiful greenery on its branches and just feeling in awe. And I think, to me, awe and reverence feel very much on the same plane. This is so much of what my mission of inspiring people to see casual magic is about, right? It's taking something as casual, as mundane as a tree that might be present in your neighborhood that you see every single day, and just choosing to stop for a second and look at it with new eyes and look at it in a way that you are trying to find awe, and therefore accessing this reverence and honoring this being in front of you, honoring all the lessons that it has to teach you, the strength and wisdom in its long existence, potentially even before you. And I would just like say out loud my gratitude, and I would also say out loud all the like things that were burdening me. And I was having this like conversation with my tree. And it sounds, you know, to some people this will feel quite like esoteric. They can't imagine sitting in a park and like talking to a tree that is not going to talk back in the language that we know. But in my experience, when you are willing to give your humility to nature, answers find you in new ways. Like for me, I went to my tree a few months ago and I was really struggling, and the sort of answer that was put in my head, I believe, by the tree, was the names of two friends. I found myself thinking of them. And to me, that was like, okay, I feel that this is a message I'm receiving, that somehow the answers that I need are in connecting with these friends in some way. And so, yeah, I think it's so beautiful, this idea of meditating in reverence to the nature around you. And something that you teach me, Ben, is to be so verbal in that gratitude.
I hope it to be accessible for people in their own lives. Even if you living in the middle of a city, like we can find the points where nature does come through, like what Kira's mesh was talking about with the peregrine falcons, you know, in the middle of London, or, you know, a little city park or something.
I would love if you could talk to us more about some of the indigenous practices of these lands. I'm talking England, this place, the land of the colonizers, right? I think often when we think of indigenous practices, we are not associating that with the West. We almost don't even think of ourselves, you know, particularly I think white British people feel so disconnected from their land, or carry a lot of like guilt for the things that our ancestors have done to other indigenous cultures around the world. But I know that so much of your work and what you're passionate about is reclaiming the practices of these lands so that we may feel more connected to and in reverence of them. I would love if you could speak to those practices.
The knowledge of this land is so deep and rich pre-Roman times. The civilization since the Industrial Revolution, or actually not, since the 1500s, England has been acting as the colonizer, right? The British Empire was super widespread. Like, you know, I can't remember the exact figure, but a lot of the world was controlled by that, and it was devastating to indigenous cultures around the world. But if we look to before the Romans arrived, we see that there was the Celts who lived on these lands, and there was pagan beliefs, and there was Druidism, and there was all of these different traditional indigenous knowledge systems of these lands, which were largely wiped out by the Romans and then by the Christian settlers because of the threat that they posed to the monotheistic civilization that was trying to be created, which then went on to do the atrocities that we saw with the British Empire. And a lot of the work that I'm trying to do at the moment is reclaiming that knowledge from before the Roman times. And that's really difficult because the Druids actually didn't write anything down because they really believed in the oral tradition and in the passing of knowledge orally. Actually very difficult to find like real authentic knowledge about what that was. And a lot of the knowledge that we have comes from Roman and Christian writers who would be interacting with these more indigenous communities, but be doing it through the lens of the oppressor or whatever. So it is difficult to find what these are. Essentially what it ties back to is very deeply rooted culture in gratitude to nature, as we see across almost all indigenous knowledge systems. And that's because these peoples would have been so deeply and intimately connected with working the land. They would have been a very agrarian civilization. The fundamental belief that they held was the way that nature treated them was fundamental to their survival. If they had a bad harvest, if they had too cold a winter, their children were going to be starving to death because they lived that in proximity with the elements. And so they were thinking to themselves, how can we ensure that nature treats us the best it possibly can? How can we ensure that we get as many gifts from the natural world as we possibly can so that we can continue to survive and thrive and live? And gratitude and ceremony was the answer. And so there would be bards and ovates who would be singing, reading poetry. There would be druids who were doing ceremony and offerings and all these different things.
What is a druid?
A druid is essentially the wise person of the pagan Celtic societies. So the druid would act as scholar, they'd act as priest, they'd act as teacher, they'd act as peacemaker. And oftentimes in Celtic society, the druid was the one who was turned to for wisdom, even by like the chiefs of these different Celtic tribes. So if there was a conflict between two different like groups back in Celtic times, it would be the druid who'd be the one who would come in to kind of help resolve the disputes. And each group would tend to have like one druid, and there would be druid schools where they would gather to share knowledge and wisdom and teachings. There's so much potential in us reclaiming that knowledge as best we can to live as better stewards in these times and in the modern era. But there are different resources that can be accessed to like learn more about this. It's a continual process of learning for sure. That the central tenet that it always comes back to is being a good steward to nature.
I think it's so beautiful that we're trying to bring back these indigenous practices, but because it feels like we're so far from them in the way that we live, particularly if anyone listening to this is living deep in a city, potentially with very little access to nature, you don't see a lot of greenery, you don't see a lot of trees. My
journey with discovering that has come essentially through the celebration of the Great Wheel of the year, which is essentially every 6 weeks there is a celebration to mark kind of the next phase of the year, and it goes in this big cycle from the summer solstice to the winter solstice, which is the longest and shortest days of the year. As a starting point, I'd really recommend people to look into that practice of celebrating the Great Wheel and thinking about how their lives could potentially be restructured to be around that, because there's so much wisdom and there's so much knowledge held in these different parts of the wheel and what we could be doing at those times to be better reflecting the natural cycle. As we live in this modern era, we're expected to be delivering the same level of output all the time. And actually, if we look to nature, we don't see the trees having leaves in their branches all year round. We don't see them trying to be continuing this output even when it's getting dark at 4 p.m.
You've mentioned it quite a few times, but I think is core little thread that has been weaving itself through all these parts of the culture of care, and that is this idea of reciprocity, the act of giving and receiving. I would love to ask you more about both sides of this coin. What role has giving played in your life, and then how do you feel that that has come back to you?
I really have spent the last kind of 3 or 4 years of my life trying to give wherever I can. And that's taken a lot of different manifestations and a lot of different forms, but that feels like the central theme that's been there. And to begin with, I think I didn't really know why I was necessarily doing that. I felt really cool to do it and it felt right to be in that space of giving, but I didn't quite know like what was calling me to be doing that specifically. With further reflection and with further listening and with sitting with that question and with nature, in that this central concept of reciprocity just kind of came up, and I really resonated with it. This idea that the more we give, the more we receive. If you seek what you give, you will find it. And so everything which you want in life, everything that you're looking for, that you're yearning for, that you're seeking, if you give that, you will find it. And it comes back to this central, not seek, give what you seek and you will find. That's the right framing of that.
Give what you seek,
you will find. Yeah.
So, for example, if you are wanting to be loved and nurtured in a certain way, you should give that love and nurturing to others.
Yes.
And it will return to you.
Yes. And to all beings. You know, and that can be like the butterfly that you see walking down. If you're walking down the street and you see a butterfly and you give that butterfly the kind of love that you want and you want to find, like, you will find that. And there is obviously a trust and a faith that's required in it, because it's not transactional. And so much of what we've been taught is that things have to be transactional. You have to receive what you want in that moment, otherwise you're not going to get it. Or you know, but it's that the undercurrents of reciprocity is so much deeper than this transactional relationship.
Interesting, because I think, you know, there's this idea of compassion fatigue, where we almost see ourselves as a well of water, and when we're pouring care and love and nurturing energy into others, we're slowly pouring that water out of us. And a lot of us feel that we are empty wells, right? And then we're pouring, but there's nothing left to pour from, and it's not being poured back into by others. And in your concept of reciprocity, right, you're saying, oh, you just keep giving and eventually you will receive. What if anyone listening feels that they are giving that love and that care to people in their lives, to projects, to their work, whatever it might be, but they're feeling like they're not getting it back? Where does reciprocity fit into that?
Firstly, that's such a understandable state to be in, and it makes so much sense. And I can experience that a lot as well, for sure. And that's where the trust comes in, I think. We're not necessarily aware of how much we receive. We can get very caught up in our own worlds and our own, like, kind of ways of being and stuff, that we may not actually realize the ways in which we are receiving. And that can be from nature, fundamentally, and also from friends. And, you know, I'm sure everyone's experienced it, where you've been in a room full of people that love you and care about you, but because you're not feeling that in yourself, you actually struggle to receive that love and that care. And so therefore your well is, they're trying to fill up your well, but it's not necessarily able to come in so much.
There's a lid on it.
Exactly. There's a lid on the well. And again, that isn't to criticize at all. That makes complete sense. And that's why opening the heart is really the first step, because it's when we open the heart that we can realize how much we can receive. And it's also about inviting in people and inviting in contexts and situations where the reciprocity is more obvious and more explicit. So for instance, like with the community that you build, with the friends that you make, with the relationships that you choose to cultivate, thinking in those terms of, I really want to give to this, but I also know that I need to receive from this as well.
And how reliable is reciprocity in this context?
Exactly. If the answer to that question is unreliable, then it's a good indication that it may not be right for you, and it may not be in service for you to continue to give so much to that specific thing. And that can be difficult, because you may have been giving to it for a long time. If it feels like you're not receiving, then that's a really strong indication that, like, okay, it may not be the right fit anymore. Having the trust that there are so many spaces and people and and contexts out there which you can receive from.
I
and you're
love
worthy
that.
of that.
So it's not about deciding not to give anymore. It's about deciding where to give.
Exactly.
And so it's kind of redirecting that giving process. So it's not about like shutting down your heart, being like, oh, when I give, I get nothing in return. People don't love me when I'm pouring so much love into them. It's like, no, like you need to keep that heart open, keep the lid off of the well, right? Keep the water flowing out, but just decide where you're directing it based on the reliability of that reciprocity in the context. I want to also mention your birthday.
Yeah, go for
So
it.
I think it's a great example. So the other day, this guy here, Cancer Baby,
Crab.
turned 24?
24.
24. And you designed just the most gorgeous concept for a birthday party, which was that everyone has to come and give their gift. Whatever their gift means, right? So a talent, it could host a workshop, you could do a spoken word piece, you could sing a song. I think that literally the whole concept of that birthday is kind of reciprocity, right? Because we're coming here to give our talents, but then we're also receiving from everyone. And something that I thought was so beautiful in terms of vulnerability from you is we had a kind of open mic moment, and Ben felt pressure to be in like host mode, event mode. Oh, I'm so used to hosting all these events. But he kind of realized like, no, this is a moment where I can also like take a step back and just like receive, and sort of allowed everyone else to sort of like take over, right? And to allow himself to receive love and words of affirmation and all these talents and gifts from all these people who love him. And there was so much nourishment from all of us giving to you that we then received through that process.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a beautiful birthday.
Thank you. A space of open-hearted beings, you know, and it's like that I am so often surrounded by people who are trying to be open-hearted. You know, I recognize how much blessing there is in that. And the work, therefore, I really feel is trying to continue to encourage more people to be in that open-hearted state.
Ben.
Jade.
Wow.
We've yapped.
We've yapped.
Yapped
Guys,
and
this
yapped
is
and yapped.
officially the longest episode ever. We have talked to the sun and back about all these like beautiful ideas, and I hope you can just feel the passion from Ben. This is why it's so easy for us to talk about this endlessly in a way that's also energy giving, right? Because I think sometimes when you're talking for hours on end, maybe you're 2 hours in, the conversation reaches sort of a slump where both of you are thinking, oh, you know, when is this going to be over? But I personally haven't felt that, because it feels like every single topic that we're broaching has so much energy to give us from just digging into it, and I feel like we have so much alignment in terms of our values that turning these ideas over with you is just a joy. And I feel so grateful to have your voice on this podcast, and for everyone listening, I just know that you would have gotten so much value from this. I would love to ask you, Ben, if you have a final word of advice to everyone listening. What is your parting message?
My final message, which I think echoes what we had at the event, at the end of the event, is we are capable of so much as human beings. Like, the human potential is so high. If you can find the specific area, and that can be literally anything, which makes you shine, which makes you sing, which makes your being just come alive, there is so much beauty and potential in that. And particularly in sharing that with others and holding space where others can come around that shine, right? And so I guess the party message from me is that it can be so scary out there, and it can be very isolating, but I think if we find nourishment in nature, in community, and in ourselves, and the connection that and building real intentional strong connections with those three central kind of areas, we can nourish ourselves to be able to step out and help others do the same. And if we can continue to do this, the ripple effect of that is so strong. And that isn't just, you know, with like nature connection work or the kind of work that I'm doing. It can be with whatever is your niche, whatever is your area which you love. Parenthood, yeah. Or even simpler things, just a hobby that you absolutely love to do. But if you can be nourished enough to be able to hold space for others to do the same, and we continue to do this, then the potential we have is so strong. And I really do fundamentally believe it's the continued day-to-day practice of doing that, and more and more and more people continuing to do that, which is going to build the structures that we need to do wonderful, beautiful things. The world certainly needs more wonder and more beauty in these times.
So we have a final little ritual tradition. I would love to ask you, Ben, what has been a moment of casual magic this week for you?
Moment of casual magic. I went to an event on the Brighton seafront with a sound system, King Tafari Love Music, Brighton's original kind of reggae and dub sound system. Absolutely phenomenal. People who run that, such beautiful souls. We had a big dance on this roof terrace with the setting sun and then the moonrise.
Wow.
It was so beautiful. Just a lot of people just dancing, enjoying themselves, connecting in with the real vibrations of that genre of music. And then it finished at 10. It was dark, and me and some friends ran into the sea, which was just there, and we went for a sea swim underneath the stars.
Oh.
And it was just so magical. And in that moment, like being in the water, kind of completely in the water, and then looking up and seeing the stars, you just get this like embodied sense of your place in it all. And it's such a beautiful, magical feeling to remember that place and be like, okay, I'm just here now. It was so magic and so beautiful. So yeah, that's my moment.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank
Thank you guys for listening. If you guys would like to reflect even more on this episode, then I have a journal prompt for you. So feel free to get out your notes app, or you can run and grab a journal and a pen, or you can just reflect on this question in your head if you prefer. Reflect on times when you felt truly connected to nature, to others, and to yourself. How did each of these moments make you feel? How can you cultivate space for these connections in your daily life? And maybe what in your life can you step away from, and what can you step towards? And feel free to pause this episode or go back if you want to see those questions again. They should be on screen. But yeah, thank you guys so much for making it through this entire episode. Like, if you have gotten to this point, I just want to give you like a moment of congratulations, because I think in the modern day, it is so hard to finish long form pieces of content, you know, to like corral your attention enough to really sit with something, to be present with something for this period of time. And I really commend you, because at least to me, long form content is where so much value lies in shifting my perspective on things, and hopefully you've really been able to sit with your own perspectives and maybe to allow these ideas about community and nature and connection to wash over you and illuminate parts of your life that maybe you'd like to change or reinvigorate in certain ways. And if no one has told you today, I just want to tell you that you are enough. You are enough as you are, whether you spend all your time in nature or you've never been to a field before in your life, you've never been to a forest before in your life. You are enough. And we are all in this constant process of becoming. And yes, we can have big goals and big dreams we want to achieve, but also right here, right now, as you are enough. And I honor you. Thank you guys so much for being here.
Stay tuned and stay magical.